Hello, Buttercup. Welcome back to my channel. Today's book review is Guncle by Stephen Rowley. This is kind of like a coming of age for someone in their 40s, which you wouldn't think is a thing. However, the setup is that Patrick, who is the uncle of Grant and Maisie, take them in after one, their mom dies of cancer, and two, their father goes into a rehab because he is addicted to narcotics. And Patrick has somewhat recently lost, but not really recent, and feels very recent to Patrick, his boyfriend in a car accident, and he is barely hanging on, really, until he gets to take care of Maisie and Grant for 9 weeks while their father is in rehab. And that's when you see the growth, you see the healing, you see the grief process moving forward, not just because Patrick was best friends with Sarah, the mom, but also him grieving over Joe, his boyfriend that passed away. They were hit by a drunk driver and Patrick survived, but Joe did not. So he is grieving two people. It is a fantastic read. I don't know if it would count as a coming of age, but it's like and he's not midlife. Well, maybe he's midlife. Coming of age. I think there is a word for that. I know it's a theme in women's fiction where a woman goes through a divorce, or maybe her spouse dies and then she might lose the home, things like that. And then it's a rebirth. Okay. Can't think of the word, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It's perfection. It's amazing. I did cry. But it's also really funny because Patrick, he's not trying to be anyone in particular. He's just being himself. And he's an uncle. He's not trying to be their dad. Their dad is still here. And Greg, who is the brother of Patrick and the father of Grant and Maisie, hopefully this timeline makes sense. But Grant wanted Patrick to take care of them, and not just because he's a fun guy and he lives in Palm Springs and he has a pool, which I really want a pool and I want to be in hot weather right now, but because one, he's fun and he doesn't particularly take things so seriously, not in a bad way but in a good way, and also Patrick needs to face his grief process because he's been holding back, especially with Joe, but now with Sarah, it's hard. It's hard for all of the characters in this book. I knew that it was going to have a happy ending, and it did. It did end happily ever after. And not just the whole grief process of going through the emotions and accepting that a loved one or loved ones have passed away as like the main thing to overcome in this book, but also Clara, who is the sister of Patrick and Greg. Okay, Clara. Well, she's kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say antagonist. She's just having some problems of her own, and she is definitely projecting. And she tries to take the kids away at a certain point because she supposedly knows best, but Patrick handles it. And instead of being nasty to her, he actually understands to a certain extent of where she's coming from because she's very hurt. And I thought that was very refreshing because it could have easily become a fight to the death because she issues him with legal stuff. Don't ask me the paperwork and the wording. She hires a lawyer to try and get them back forcibly, and he has some very good lawyers under his belt because he used to be in Hollywood, won a Golden Globe and everything. But after the death of Joe, he kind of secluded himself in Palm Springs. I don't like her. And she's just annoying. I really appreciated showing that aspect of him saying, I have the best lawyers at my disposal. You do not want to do this. But also, think about what you're doing to Grant and Maisie, and that's the most important aspect of this situation. And step back for a little bit and ask yourself, why are you doing this? Because you're going through a divorce and you're afraid to lose the kids that you have known. She's the stepmom, but she's grown close to her husband's children. And so there's a lot of things going on there as well. Not only is she grieving over Sarah and shocked to learn about Greg's addiction and him going into rehab, but she's also losing a husband and children, and just like too much things going on at once. And so the reaction was, okay, I'm gonna take Grant and Maisie because you can't handle it. I think that is something that you see, but people don't talk about that. There's a lot of real life situations that are sad, but it makes sense to talk about, and it should be talked about more. Especially grief, of course. Every single person will go through the grief process at least once, but it's probably going to be many, many times. Unless you're a psychopath and you don't feel anything, then okay. But usual people, you will be going through the grief process. And I don't see it talked about that much, and I think that's because people are scared to talk about it because it's gonna happen, but we try and avoid that. And I think more books in a contemporary setting, and even like in a lighthearted setting, which is interesting. It's like a lighthearted grief contemporary birth of Patrick and even other characters. I think that is the best way to go because humor is very healing and it's also free. So if you can find the humor, and not necessarily what happened, but just humor around you, it's very helpful. And maybe even if you don't laugh, but smiling is very helpful too. It sets off the positive receptors in your brain. So does laughing, but you know, if I understand if you can't laugh if someone has passed away, you can't find anything that's positive, anything that's funny. Just everything right now for you is so negative, I can't laugh. A small smile, anything works in the grief process that is positive or maybe even neutral. It's hard, it's very hard, but I related a lot to almost all these characters. I was gonna say all. I don't really relate to Clara, sorry. But almost all the characters, I do relate to them. Even the side characters, I just enjoyed this writing. It was funny, refreshing, and I definitely recommend The Guncle by Stephen Rowley, and I'm excited to read the second book. At first, this was just supposed to be a standalone, but it is a huge hit, and you can definitely find other stories to write other books in. So I totally don't mind that there's a second book coming out, and it's now turned into a series. I recommend this book wholeheartedly, though do keep in mind that it could be very upsetting for some of you if you have recently lost someone, but I think that this is a safe book to go through the grieving process on your own through Patrick and his family, and then see how things feel after this book. I think art and literature can be so helpful in so many ways because it is a safe area to explore your feelings and your emotions and your thoughts without like necessarily other people knowing, unless you're sobbing, then someone around you might notice. But if you're alone and you need a private and personal way to just feel those feelings of grief and have some type of relatability, that's not a word, I'm not even going to think about it because we're just going to go with it, because there's a feel of I need to know I'm not alone in this process. And I think this book would definitely give that to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Do some self-care. It's tough out there lately, but I believe in you. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.